have an opinion on mocking frameworks. Today, these are the mocking frameworks. You only have 4 options: RSpecMock, Mocha, RR, and FlexMock. But they all suck. Sorry, Jim. So stub. But the reason they suck is because you can stub non-existent methods for most of the part. You can just, with RSpecMocks, you can just stub anything and it won't fail, and you can just have all these fantasy tests. No arity checking, so you can actually, even if the method does exist and you put in the wrong arity, it will not blow up, as it should. It doesn't do any visibility matching, so even if you have a private method, you stub it, it'll still work. And it has an insanely complex API that really doesn't do what you think it does. And there's also expectations. I'm not sure, I don't like the expectation pattern in tests because it doesn't let you group your expectations with where they should be. So you do the setup in the beginning and you find out later at the end that your expectation of you should receive is not there. And there are also way too many lines of code. Every single one is about more than 2,000 lines of code, which is a lot for a mocking framework, in my opinion. So the solution is that I made Spy. Spy is a mocking framework that's based off the Jasmine testing suite at Pivotal Labs because I worked there and loved it. And it basically solves all these issues. It raises errors, it checks arity, visibility. It uses a Spy testing pattern, so your expectations and setup are separate. And it only uses 800 lines of code. And there's also no global pollution of objects or instance variables. So now let's check out the README, because I believe in READMEs are awesome. So basically what you can do is, it's a very simple, is that big enough? So it's a really simple API. All you have to do is do spy.on and you'll be able to, very equivalent to RSpecMocks where you do stubs. And this will stub that item. And you can just do it. This is very familiar to all of you, or should be. Instead of doing any instance, I have onInstance method of a given class. Now what you can do is also, I create this new thing called, mocks and doubles have a problem. So when you're using a double, you actually don't, you're creating an object not representative of any other class that you have actually ever created. And you should really never do that. You should always have an object that you're going to use and be very real. And so what this does is that actually will take a class that you've already exists, create a fake of it. So let's say you have a model, and the model has a lot of difficult setup. Usually this is an instance where you want to create a mock or a double. It just has a lot of crazy setup. So what you do is you just create a class of, you do a mock of it, and what it'll do is my library will just stub out all the methods, but it'll act exactly like yours, or whatever class that you're stubbing. And then from there on out, you can just stub out all the methods and also call through appropriately, and it'll just do what the actual code does. And it all does a response to correctly, and it does all the inheritance correctly too, because the mock is actually just a child, like it normally would be. You can also do everything else that would normally be, you can find in RSpecMocks. I've actually just took the entire RSpecMocks testing library, or all the tests, and then put it against my library, so it's at least as good as RSpecMocks. And then you can also have spies. So what you can do is, when you actually spy on a method, you'll get a new object, and this object will record everything that has ever or will be called, or everything that will be called to that method from there on out. And so what I do is I create a call log, and that call log on top of it will give you arguments that you put in, the result that it put out, where it was called, from where it was called, and I think that's it. Yeah. You can also do call-throughs like most of the RSpec now does, more recently. And I think that's it. Oh yeah, and it works with all the tests because it's such a simple API. All you have to do is just require spy and it'll just work on everything. Yeah, that's it.
Well, this talk is called Stop the Rant. It's a rant, so that makes it a little hypocritical. So I'm going to start by confessing, such as in Alcoholic Anonymous. I'm Juan Pablo, and I haven't coded in PHP for 4 years. I work as a development manager in a company that's called CSV Soft, or there you have the mail addresses. I have quite a funny background in PHP because I used to work in Java, and usually it's PHP, Java, hipster, but now, so the order is quite funny, but so that's fate. But why do I speak of PHP? Because there are some things that I still see in the community, in blogs, and that rather not see in the future, such as this. This is a paper that I read the night before coming. Basically, it's a PHP. It says that. I think that he's understanding all wrong, because he assumes that Ruby and Python are not replacements, are replacements of LAMP that are small pages, and for me, I'm not interested in that. That shouldn't exist. But I'm not interested in reading this anymore in my life. It's not a paper. This is written by somebody by Python, but it went through all the Ruby list, including our list, and it has a lot of reasons why PHP is bad, most of which are wrong, and that's an evil thing. And it starts from the perception that PHP is LAMP, but it is not. There are frameworks in PHP. There are people interested in doing frameworks in PHP, but there are many things that for which PHP is criticized, and they are there. What am I aiming at? So we all know that Ruby is superior. Those who don't see in Ruby a superior language, I think that they don't understand it. The problem is that if there are people who don't move, don't budge, they're not budging because of something. It's not that they are masochists, but they like to code in PHP. There are other things aside of language to choose. So there are more things that you buy when you buy a language. So I show the map of what I care about. Maybe it's to a greater extent what most of us here care for. Language, for me, is a small part. It's fun if the language is better, but I think that the syntax and if the consistency of language would be important. None of us would be coding in script. Yeah, and I think that there are many things that, well, I'm interested in Ruby, and I don't like other languages because of the types of community they have, because of the way they enable me to develop. And I think that there are elements that we could improve as a community. I think that maybe we have an important challenge ahead, trying to put ideas together, and maybe libraries that are doing the same things, trying to see what is interesting in each, try to merge them. And that is being done in other communities, like Ruby and Hello. The influence of the Ruby community is very important. We no longer have to tell the world that our language is better, because the things that we are interested in are already the things that show the way. So if we don't do it as a community, some other community will do it. They'll understand better things. So we still have to package handlers and Node.html. So I think that we're going that way. I liked a lot the talks that I heard, and I think that they are geared in the same direction. So I think that the call to action is really worth it. And I said, stop the rant and let's focus in making the Ruby ecosystem grow. Thank you.
Now I'm going to make an introduction to Padrino and try to do it in 5 minutes. Now the first thing is why Padrino? And many people know Rails and platforms, and many know this. Now the idea with Padrino is to follow the Sinatra philosophy: simple to use, simple to hack, and this should be fun to use. And all this you can do thanks to Sinatra. Now, what we have different, you have a whole series of things that you can decide, and you can choose template and engines, and a whole series of things like the generators. You can use a mailers if you want. You have several helpers, and you have an admin list, and some this comes through the platform and is integrated with the generator and many more things. This is a fact. Padrino is 4 times faster than Rails. We have a large community that is growing all the time. We are in all these places. So this is a fast tour. It's very simple to the Sinatra app. This is a big plus when you speak about Ruby that is web-oriented and makes it easy to understand. Controllers like blogs to use content types who use Ruby. There's no magic here. The same when you do multiple applications. And this is one of the important points. I'm going to see this in a while. Rendering views. Use any rendering engine you want, an integrated mail that has to be improved yet, and the admin. And this is one of the points when you come in is quite interesting. You have a scaffold to start and do applications. And this is a view. And this is editing data. Now, initial structure. Padrino has less than 10 files. Rails has over 50 files. And you can do structures that go to one file. Mythbuster. Padrino is great for small applications. That's a lie. And they have the multiple applications. Multiple applications are those who that allow us to encapsulate this knowledge in different modules, which you then add, and you can do more complex things. For example, you can have your site, your blog, your product gallery, your backend with Padrino, and many more things. The 0.11 version, which is the one you have just launched, we did a full redesign of the admin, new identity of the platform. We upgraded to Sinatra 1.1 and the HP router 0.11. CSRF form protection out of the box, safe buffer for all the helpers, a new rig file format, which has been simplified. And this is very important. The app name spacing, when you generate an app, you have a module and you can choose how it's called. And this allows us to do applications that are gamified, and then you can use Bundler and put them anywhere. And this is strongly linked to project modules. And then another feature is that we started to have performance tools. You have memory measurement tools, loading one gem or the other. You can see how much this is loading your app. And this is one of the things that we care about in Padrino. And what about the future? It will just get better. We are working constantly to improve efficiency and performance of the Padrino apps. A typical app, so that you have an idea, and can consume about 100 mega. And when you compare to other with Rails, it can be much bigger. What took us so long to have the first version? We had several things in mind. So the idea was to improve performance. A typical Rails performance would take up 2 giga of RAM to serve less than 100 recs per second. And the idea is to buy more RAM. We think we can do things better, and Ruby is not that slow. This is an example that you can use with chunked responses. One solutions, we can use a system with callbacks, and this works very well, JRuby and Rubinius, which is concurrence. And then everything can be modularized, and to finish, APIs that can be worked with easily, the routes redesigned, admin by UX, and that is all basically. Thank you very much.
My nickname is Badoso, and I'm going to talk about how to use some high-level interpretation of intervals in Ruby. So I had a problem that I need to solve. I needed to schedule some advertisements in a company, and all the long of the day I should have some rules to post these ads. For example, one ad of the same publisher shouldn't be in the same hour than another ad, and stuff like that. And I thought, well, I can just model this kind of rules, and there were a lot of rules. I couldn't do it without getting too much code garbage. using intervals, an interpretation of intervals, intersection, union, complement, and stuff like that. So I started to use Borel. I made Borel for that. Here. So Borel is a gem. It is hosted on Ruby Gems. And so what does it mean, Borel, at the first place? Borel sets are in mathematics made by, it's almost something like an interval, but it may be union, intersection, and any countable union or intersection of intervals is called a Borelian set. So I just thought the name was good. You can put in the README, so you can install it. It's just like in a regular gem, and that's it. You can make an instance of it using a constructor, just like an array. For example, you can use a number. You can instantiate an empty interval, an interval with just one point, an interval with 2 points, and a union of arbitrary intervals. You can also convert some native Ruby objects to intervals. And you also have exposed the interval, the infinity number, if you are using numeric intervals. And what's the idea behind Borel? The idea is that you can use it not only with numbers, but you can use it also to model any comparable class. For example, if you have a class which has the diamond method defined, you can use it in Borel, for example. You can use, for example, letters. For example, the lexicographic order, A, B, C has an order, so you can use Borel to make intersection of intervals using letters, for example, or the time class, which also has the diamond method definited. So I just let's put hands-on and see how it works. You have. Before I made Borel, I was looking at another interval arithmetic gems called intervals, but intervals was mainly used for scientific applications. It was something like if you need to do some complicated stuff like an integral or something like that, you could do intervals. So it wasn't suited for my necessities. Also, Borel is very well specified if you want to contribute or if you want to extend it. And it runs on 193.200 MRI, JRuby and Rubinius latest stable releases. So let's go. You use a gem install Borel, and let's do stuff. I'm gonna open a shell and put it to work. Okay, so you just require it like another regular gem. And you can now use the interval class for your needs. Oops. And you can, for example, instantiate an empty interval, and you have some methods that you can check. For example, it is empty. It is kind of obvious. Oh, it doesn't have a clear method. And you can check another stuff. For example, if you are doing a complicated calculation, maybe you can check if your interval is just 1 point instead of an interval. It has the degenerate method to check it, for example. And it's the same thing like an interval with the same point in the beginning and the end. And you can check the infinite submethods to check the extrema of your interval, just like it would be expected. And you also can get it in an array, like stuff. And you can, for example, let's make an intersection of intervals. All right, time up. Okay, that's it. Check it out.
In 2003, I started to read about Ruby in the Programming Ruby book, Famous Pickaxe, and I said, this is what I want to do. I want to work programming Ruby. And unfortunately, I started to look for things in the programmers list that were available in Uruguay, and I felt so lonely. Nobody knew what Ruby was. So in 2006, I couldn't bear it any longer, and because nobody knows what Ruby is, I have to start speaking about Ruby so I can speak about Ruby with other people. I'm wearing a tie, and my hair wasn't white yet, but I had a tummy already. Now, so at the ORT University, I started speaking about Ruby, and there were about 15 people there. And because I couldn't bear it any longer, I decided to cross the river and see what there was in Buenos Aires, because there wasn't a critical mass in Montevideo. So I subscribed to the Ruby list in Argentina, and we decided in December 2006 to organize the first Rubyists meeting. There were 18 of us, and there were 16 from Buenos Aires, myself from Montevideo, and Luis Lavena from the city of Tucumán in Argentina. At least 3 or 4 of these guys are here today: Michelle, Norman, Lucas, and to tell the truth, that meeting changed my life. Then in Uruguay, trying to go on, and with the help of the UILOG, we organized a couple of talks. I found no picture of the crowd there, but this was the announcements to start speaking about Ruby. And what I did to get more speakers, I imported a couple of Argentinians that I had met at that other meeting. So Luis Lavena came, Manuel Istarán, and Michel Martens, who spoke today. And, well, this was quite a success. And then there were 8 of us in 2008. I don't recall where this was, but Evan was already with us. Both is there. They're taking a picture or something in the back. And Rodolfo Pilas is there, the sysadmin. But that was 2008, and there were only 8 of us. We had a great audience there, but fortunately in 2009, some people, including Norman Clark and Adrián Muñoz, who are with us today, organized Locos por Rails, Mad for Rails, which was quite an international event, which was quite successful. There were 19 people from Uruguay to that conference with 150 people, with quite an important turnout. And then in 2010, that picture you recognize was taken here. That was quite a good turnout, RubyConf Uruguay. 2011, 330 people in RubyConf Argentina. Well, there are many more. There's a greater population in Argentina, don't be mean. But that was also very successful, and a lot of people went there from Uruguay. 2011, RubyConf Uruguay, 270. 10 more than the previous one, a great success. 2012, Argentina, 400 Rubyists. 430, I'm sorry. Sorry, Argentinians. And this is the talk I gave at that RubyConf Argentina, this very same presentation, and we're inviting everyone to come to Uruguay to the RubyConf this year. I am pleased to say that we're about 300 people here. 320, somebody is telling me. And the important thing is that we want to hold a conference every 6 months at the Rio de la Plata. We are organizing ourselves in this way. To find out about the exact dates, please follow the Twitters. There are not only annual meetings, you have the meetups as well.
5 minutes. I'm Federico Silva. I work in concert and I waste my time on Twitter. As Fede Silva, I'm co-organizer of the Scala meetups. And I'm the self-appointed Scala ambassador in Rubyland. Scala in 5 minutes, impossible, Captain. It's too much to speak, to mention. But let me say a couple of things to see whether I can hook you and then you come closer. And I'm going to justify why I speak of Scala in a Ruby meeting. It's a multi-paradigm general purpose statically typed posted in GVM. It's pre-compiled and it statically typed, and it can use all the libraries, all the available, quite a few. Scala is functional, is succinct, but not as Haskell. It's a little easier to draw information just by looking at the code, and it loves immutability. At a time when multi-cover is increasingly important and where things don't change under your feed, it's really valuable. It's also object-oriented, and it has novel ways of expressing object composition. I don't have to explain you what a mix-in is, but only that we do it statically. Now, in a couple of slides, you'll see that. And it's very flexible, so much so that it's criticized for being so flexible. But I don't think that Ruby people will get frightened. Scala has a unified type system. It's not like Java with capital letters, and everything is an object, even functions, and we don't have type interference. It's a void type stutter. Scala can perform several kinds of static monkey patching via type classes, like an open inheritance, mixing structural types that it's similar to ductile typing, where I say that I can say that I'm going to read something that has an X method and a Y property, and as long as it meets that contract, I'm going to receive it as a parameter. And there I have an example. I appoint meaning to the expression in the left, a P, that's a value. It will never change, and it's a new class, a person with a mix-in. I'm mixing the time of distance. And yesterday I asked something about DCI. I don't know whether you know what it is, but it's a way you can separate your code, and here I'm separating specific capabilities that if I add them to people whenever I want to use them. I can't dwell on it too long, but this is an example of multi-patching, and it's static. I know exactly what's being patched, when and where. The other thing why Scala is criticized is because apparently it's complicated. But you assume that developers are adults and they are aware of what they are doing, but not heavy ammunition. You don't run the risk of losing any limbs. It's not something that that I have to explain Ruby's. I think of untidy multi-patching or free of charge metaprogramming. Shooting your legs is very easy in any powerful language, but we're adults and we like to be empowered. Scala and Ruby. I heard that many people, for instance, in RAID, will say, well, if you can use Ruby and you can drop to Java, but it would be better to use Scala rather than Java. It's fun, it's more powerful, and JRuby, to my surprise, has native integration with Scala. It supports an overloading, and it allows you to use JRuby and crazy names. And Scala has a dynamic which enables you to do method missing. So you can go to a dynamic environment and you can respond to unexisting methods. So not much more to say because I have a second left.
I'm going to speak about some of the MongoDB secrets. This could be a very long presentation, but I'll try to summarize this And this is addressed at the developers. Who am I? I'm Pablo Barrios. I developed Ruby since 2008 and Rails since 2009. I work in Insignia in Tucumán, Argentina. I'm Luis Lavena's neighbor, if you know him. With the guys in the office, we participated in the Rails Rumble 2012 with an app called Staffy, and that is where we used MongoDB. I will show you a couple of things. I don't have too much time for lightning in this lightning talk. Now, let us see the secrets. I will focus on this for developers. It has lots of things for DB admins, but I won't approach those things. Now, the size of the documents. All the relational databases store things in rows and columns. This program does it in a BSON format, which is a binary representation of the JSONs. This is limited in size. It is not unlimited. It is estimated that the size of the document can be it should be less than 16 mega. It's not mandatory, but they will tell you more or less that if it's more than 16 megas, it is poorly designed. The writing errors. MongoDB uses safe square is, so you can do fast writing in the base. The trick is that this is done asynchronously, so we don't know if there was an error or not. To see the errors, you can use the function called getLastError or use safe queries. To use safe queries, you make this behave like a relational database. This is a bit slower. And for those of us who use Rails, the tip is to use TAP, which will save us a lot of trouble. MongoDB is schemaless. This does not mean that it uses no schema. This is nothing that is predefined. This has been designed to have a rapid develop your application rapidly, but in MongoDB docs, there's a lot of schemes that have been proposed, like embedding, referencing, atomicity, which allow you to make use of almost all the advantages that MongoDB and C gives you. Multiple updates by default. Multiple updates they're not included by default. So you do one document at a time. All updates are one document at a time. It's like a limit of 1. You cannot do a limit of 5 or 10. You cannot force this. It's either you force this with a multi-and-true parameter, so it does all the multiple updates, or if not, you do it one at a time. MongoDB is case-sensitive because all the queries you do are case-sensitive. For example, if I look with the uppercase of the name, it's not the same as with the lowercase. You can use regex if you want, but this is a bit slower if you do it in this way. So my advice is to be sure to save the data so that you can retrieve them afterwards. And especially for the full text search, we recommend using something external to MongoDB. The joins. MongoDB does not support joins. For some, this is a surprise. For others, not. If we want to extract data from a collection, you always have to do a separate query. It doesn't support transactions, so be careful with the callbacks and the net attributes. These are some of the references. Thank you.
Cement. Pablitux here, and let's make a small contribution so that this conference may have a higher impact on you and the world, and to do it more interactive. So, it's very simple. What I want is that I want you to think of anything where you can write. So, it could be a tablet, a notebook, whatever, something that you see every morning and that you pay attention to. And I want you to think of 3 changes, 3 actions, very concrete actions that may have an impact on your world, in your work, in the way you develop Ruby, in the way you work at your company, whatever. 3 impacts that inspired in things that you understood, or you heard, or you discovered at this conference. One of which will have to be done for Monday afternoon. You get committed to do something that will have an impact on Monday afternoon, the other on April the 8th in 2 weeks' time, and the other one on September the 23rd, 6 months, something stronger. So think of it, you have a minute, and write it down. So you should be writing this down. If it's a talk with your colleagues, with your boss, if it's a script that you need to do, it may have something to do with reading a book, a post. It's good to write it down, because then you have another part where you share it, and because that will drill your brains. So on Monday morning, you have a lot of mails to read because you were at the RubyConf on Friday and Saturday. And now comes an addition to see whether we can help you so that you can really do it and to form a community and to discover people. Now we want you to meet your roadmap. We want you to look for a colleague to do that with. So you have 10 seconds to be in a couple with somebody who you haven't talked to yet. So sit by somebody. The lines of 3 have to move. So 10 seconds, starting now. You have to form a couple with somebody. You have to look for a router mate. You can have trios, but it's not so recommendable. You have 1 minute, 14 seconds for this lighting talk, and that you're going to use that time to tell your colleague what are your commitments, and you write that down in your agenda so that you can ask them later whether they've done what they committed themselves to do. So you share the responsibility so that your partner will do the things that he got committed to.
Tenés que toco la campanita. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Álvaro. I work for Neo. I've been working at an experiment that I want to show. It's WebGL, 3D graphs for the web. And since we are here at RubyConf UI, it may not work. Before I start this, I thought of a goal, something that you may get from the internet, but 90% of the work will be done at the customers. This is a backend Sinatra that signs the URL so that you can communicate with the Twitter app, and then the geolocation of that is solved with Bing and with Google, and everything is charged to the customer. So what does it use? 3JS, it's a library, it's a framework for 3D graphs. You can't get it through WebGL. If you have a context with, and it's a very powerful tool. It's good for you to check it. I think that it opens many possibilities to present information on the internet. As I said, geolocation is done through Bing and Google. I'd like to explain the trick. Actually, Google allows us in very few bits per second in geolocation, so my strategy says throw them at Bing. Bing doesn't put any limits, but the ones that fail there, I throw them to Google, so I try to reduce. So with a decent communication, this is not the case. There we are georeferencing close to 200 geolocations. Actually, there's not much more to say. I just wanted to show you this. Maybe I could show you how you would have the graphic. Don't expect any slides or anything. You can ask me later. So this is more or less the hashtag of RubyConf is the most important thing there. This is the graph that what has been tweeted these days from where to where. So I don't have much more to say. Thank you. That's a gem to create APIs such as REST. And the thing is that you end up having a very large sheet of codes where you have to structure the models, the rules. And I sort of followed the idea of what Rails does. And basically with that, I created this gem. It generates an adequate structure. You can install it, and having done that, I put it here in documents, and then you follow the steps. You can use these three structures. You can create without any database connection. With Active Record, you can use with SQL, you can use with Post. If you use Active Record and SQL, you can use MySQL, Post. And if not, it's going to create a blank presentation here. I'm going to create this one here. It develops a structure, and there you can see that it develops what I need. Basically, it separates the application so that I can put the presenters, decorators, the data that I want to use, and the different contexts. Basically, all this is controlled from here, and I'm included. Think RSpec debugger if you need it, depending on what you choose, active sequeller, SQL, etc. Active record, and immediately, right away, we can get into and there you have you're starting up the application so that you can start to work. Let me show you more or less what the final look is, because the idea is that someday we may turn this into a framework, not only to generate a structure, but also to provide security levels and other indication for whatever you want to create.
Si ustedes revisan Grape, hay
there's a very big structure, a format that you have to follow to include the helpers and the roots. Basically here, what I'm doing is that you can create different versions of your API, version 1, version 2, and to include them here through the class calls. And with that, we can simplify the creation of its application, and you can keep it better structured. And as it includes role, we can use API helper media to do it more contextual for business. Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is an emotional journey called Payback. Who am I? Pablo Astigarraga. Most of you know me as Pote. That's my Twitter, my GitHub. I work at CitrusSpike doing Ruby. Now, why am I making this talk? Because yet I spent 90 minutes crying out at Cavani at the stadium. So the reason is vengeance. It's not retaliation, but it's a friend's retaliation. So in 2012, and everyone was trying to make funny jokes to tell at the end of the year that the world had not come to an end. I went to a friend, we call him Foca, and he's part of the organization, and had great ideas, and I wrote down his name for a lightning talk until there was only half an hour left.
Así no.
So, of course, about 1 hour to download a keynote, to prepare all these slides, to start panicking, and I have to speak about something. So, I'm going to speak about a gem that I made in a moment of my life called Box. One of the things that inspired this gem is that I love Sinatra. And because somebody said today, Sinatra has inline templates. And to make this clear, it looks like this. If you have a file with a Sinatra app as simple as this, you can write at the end of the file, --end, and you can state what you're going to use as a template after, so that you don't have to have the files elsewhere. And I said, well, this is what I want. The thing is that this is only in Sinatra. You don't have a gem. I went to the Sinatra code, and this has to be using something. But no, that's not the case, and the Sinatra code is quite terrible. But I said, well, I'm going to write an even worse code to use just anywhere. So I wrote this code, eBox. So Box allows us to do this. When you write something like this at the end of a Ruby file and you put require box, and Box gives us this API which works. So you get a hash that has as a key the file names that you declare, here DHTML, and the valid keys you have the contents there. So this is quite useful. We're not going to do this in a big project with lots of views, but maybe in a script. Well, I don't like to have a very long multi-line string in the middle of the code, so I prefer to separate this at the end, whether it doesn't bother, and use it in this way. Now, there is a disclaimer, is that this gem is bad. Don't use it for production or anything, because you won't have good results. But I thought that a great idea would be, and I made this as a contribution, and this is the worst code I ever wrote in my life, but I thought the idea was fun. So if someone finds another way in which you can do this, which is not using Color or Ruby and changing around the stack, called AutoScript, and seeing what you have after the end, well, welcome, you can contribute this. So that is all. Thank you.